Well, good afternoon and welcome to Comp 422 and Comp 620 Information Privacy and Security, talking about computer forensics today. I'd like to thank and acknowledge the assistance of Professor Olivia McDonald of the North Carolina A&T State University Department of Criminal Justice, who reviewed my slides and added several. All right, end of course evaluations are out there. If they are important, be sure you do them. They're out on Blackboard. Do them for all your classes and give them an honest evaluation. Here's the schedule coming up. As we are here November 13th, computer forensics, that's today's topic. On Wednesday, 2 days from now, we're going to be talking about privacy. The course is information privacy and security. Next week, a week from today, we'll be talking about the artificial intelligence impact on cybersecurity, both in its detection and its attacks. On Monday, a week from today, we will again be online only. There'll be no class in Graham 208. Wednesday of that week is part of the Thanksgiving vacation. There are no classes for any course on Wednesday, November 22nd. And then the week after that is the third exam. We will be reviewing for the course on that should be Monday, by the way. That's Monday, November 27th. There are not two Wednesdays that week. Monday, November 27th, and Wednesday, November 29th will be the third exam. I have been working diligently on making another assignment. I want to have one more assignment in this class. I've thought of multiple assignments. Unfortunately, either they were trivial or impossible. I want them to run on both Windows and Apple Mac OS systems, and that appears to be difficult to do. But I'll get it out there soon. Something will be out there. Okay, we're talking about digital forensics. You can read about it in section 27.4 of the textbook. It's not that long, only 9 pages, so you should be able to read the whole thing. What is this computer forensics we're talking about? Well, it is the process of going out there and getting data for the presentation to obtain legal evidence. You want to go out there and get it in a authorized manner. You have to preserve, identify, extract, and document, interpret the data on the computer. We're going out there preparing for a trial. This is a little different than cybersecurity, which has been the topic of most of our discussion. Cybersecurity is about trying to prevent crime. I know we've spent a lot of time talking about how to be a really good hacker and how to attack, but the purpose of that, of course, is to teach you how the attacks work and what you have to do to prevent them. And that's mostly for helping to prevent an attack before it occurs. Whereas computer forensics is more oriented towards after the attack. After something has happened, you're using a computer to look for information about the crime. So it's more reactive, and cybersecurity is more proactive. Okay, what do I know about computer forensics? Not much. Fortunately, Professor Olivia McDonald has helped me out today, and so I've got a bunch of material from her and some that I dreamed up myself. I also, by the way, did read Wikipedia, and at any time you're wondering what's going on in the course, read Wikipedia. It's not the end of all information, but it's a good place to start. Computer forensics has been used for quite some time. You saw the quote, boy, Sherlock Holmes did not have a computer, but he was a forensic scientist. People have been using computer-related information. There was this BTK serial killer of a couple of decades ago. Most of you are probably not old enough to remember him, but he was a crazy, he was around killing multiple people and tried to taunt the police that he was doing it. And he sent them a floppy disk. It was a floppy disk because it was long ago and people didn't have other media. Unfortunately, what he didn't know is that there was information on the floppy disk that implicated him and where he was. More local, that was in California, but more local over in Durham a few years ago, 20 years ago, a murderer in Durham killed his wife and dumped the body in a lake. they searched his computer and it showed him looking at maps of the lake depth. Well, that seemed pretty suspicious, to look at the maps of the lake depth and then to find the body of his wife in the lake, who he said just must have happened naturally. Now, unfortunately, computer crime occurs frequently. In Purdue University, the dean of students thought that about a quarter of all the disciplinary cases involve some sort of computer evidence. The FBI thinks that now about 50% of all the cases involve using a computer to collect information. And other agencies report about 20 to 40% of all cases will require information forensics, so getting information from a computer. This is the computer age, and everybody is using computers for many purposes, and unfortunately, they're also using them to commit crimes. There are multiple ways you might use a computer to commit crime. The computer can hold it. Having child pornography on your computer is a crime. So in that case, that is the crime. You might steal the computer or use something to cause the computer to be stolen. Also, the computer can hold evidence of a crime. My example here is a spreadsheet of drug transactions. The computer was not used to commit the crime, but the drug seller foolishly left information on his computer about the crimes that occurred outside of the computer. And as we have seen throughout this class, you can commit crimes with a computer, hacking into a computer, causing all sorts of illegal activities with a computer can occur. We've been breaking into computers in many ways during this class. So those are all crimes that you can commit with a computer. So here's our first clicker question of the day. Let me, if I can find my mouse. Let's start this one. Okay, we've got 88% of the people answering the poll, and there's everybody saying, well, nobody thinks sanitizing user input is any good, or code reviews. All the above is very popular. Too bad it's not correct. Computer forensic techniques is the answer. We'll be talking today about why computer forensics help you collect information. Sanitizing user input doesn't do it. Come on, you have to be a good student. If you know that sanitizing user input is a ridiculous answer, then it can't be D, all of the above. So it's got to be one of the others. Okay. All right, moving on. How can you use a computer in crime? Well, there's multiple ways it might be used. It can be the target of the crime. And we've talked about this in several ways in our class. The old CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, looking at someone else's homework, looking at changing a grade. Okay? This is confidentiality, would be accessing access, and changing grade would be information integrity, and denial of service would be accessibility. Also, of course, accessing financial information is confidentiality, and theft of personal information, probably confidentiality. But those are ways you can use it. In this case, we're using the computer to attack a computer. In other words, the crime is entirely within the computer. You can use it as a tool. That is, the computer is used for a crime that's not necessarily totally within the computer. For instance, you are in your English class and you decide you don't want to spend any time writing on this assignment. You can cheat and copy it from someplace else. I strongly recommend, of course, you never do this. I do recommend that you write things and you always tell people, you always explain where your information came from. Just cite your sources. All you have to do is cite your sources, and it's not plagiarism. But that's a tool of using the computer. Imagine you're threatening somebody with email, extortion. You can send email to people. That's using the computer as a tool. And again, counterfeiting. Yes, some people try to use the computer to counterfeit. Gee, you can slap a dollar bill on your scanner and scan it in, print it out in full color. Gee, it looks good. Unfortunately, it's not good enough. The Treasury Department and the FBI will catch you for that one. That one's pretty easy to catch. And then sometimes the crime can occur, but computer activities can tell the law enforcement people what's been happening. A good one here is that you may not necessarily be using the emails to commit the crime, but information about the crime, particularly dates and times. You're sending emails, they have dates and times attached to them, along with text messages or things like that, have information. So if the police get hold of that information, they can see when did something happen, and also establish the sequence of events. Also, stored names. For instance, your contact list. Do you have the email address of somebody that's been harassed or threatened? Well, if you have their email address, you might not have done it, but it's always not. You could have done it. Oops, excuse me. There we go. Oh. So, who uses this computer forensics? Well, law enforcement, primarily police, the FBI, criminal justice people are using this to solve crimes. Sometimes it's used within a company. If somebody in the company is doing something inappropriate, it may not be a true crime in the sense of against the law. It may be also against the law, but you may be against the company policies. You're doing something that the company doesn't like. It can be as simple as wasting your time looking at websites that you're not supposed to look at on, you're looking at pornographic websites during work hours. That company's not going to like that, and they can use forensics tools to find out what you've been doing. Yes, and then sometimes, of course, if they want to terminate you, they can get information to do that. If you think you haven't been working hard enough, doing what you're supposed to be doing, your computer will tell a lot about what you've been doing. Or also, if there's some sort of failure, something falls apart, and I'll tell you, having been in the computing for 50 years, things fall apart all the time. You can sometimes look and find out what went wrong. And sometimes taking a deep dive into what information is left over tells you how a system works. Looking at the memory dump of a program tells you a lot about what it was doing. And so we're often using it to gather evidence to prosecute a crime. When the law enforcement is doing computer forensics, they want to be able to gather sufficient evidence in the appropriate way so that they can prosecute somebody. They have to make sure they follow all the rules. It's significantly different area for computer forensics than it is for computer science, which is why I'm indebted to those who helped me doing this. Computer forensics have to make sure you follow the legal requirements. And evidence, they can throw out evidence if they can show that you didn't follow all the rules to keep it secure and truthful. Computer forensics, also digital forensics, cyber forensics, what do you want to call it, is looking to gather digital data, criminal cases, the different types of criminal cases we discussed earlier. And you can have, of course, law enforcement, the federal FBI, the local police, SBI, anybody can be doing this, as well as there are local investigators who will assist firms in looking at cybercrime and trying to find out who done it. Because almost any time there's been a cyber attack, the companies want to know, well, who did this to me and what can I do to prevent it? The digital forensics people are going to find the evidence and keep it secure. They have to go out there and get the appropriate evidence and keep it secure. They often use specialized tools, techniques. We'll talk about a few of those in a little while, from computers, to phones, tablets, any sort of digital device that you might imagine. Also, Internet of Things. We have all sorts of devices these days. We have doorknobs that, doorbell systems that have cameras on them that record who is in your front yard. Those have been used frequently in crimes. You might see many times when somebody shows a picture on TV of this person on the front porch. The picture was taken by a doorbell system. Also, when you go up to an ATM, the ATMs have cameras. They photograph you when you're getting money out of the ATM. It helps them in the future. If there's been a problem, they can say, that's the person who did it. Of course, as the ATMs just sit there looking out at the world, if a crime is committed in the background, these cameras pick it up. And of course, they can help identify who has done the crime, which is what everybody wants to know. Who did it and how can we stop it? And why is it important? Because there's such a large number of computer crimes, of crimes being committed with the use of computer in any of the ways described, that it's very important to law enforcement to get effective data that they can collect it and present it in a court of law. So they want to gather the evidence of a suspect and make sure they can get it in a way that it will be acceptable to a court. Or if it's not, again, not always in a legal court, it can be a corporation. If the corporation thinks its employees haven't been behaving, they can go out and look. And it's sad to say that the rules for corporate investigation are not the same as rules for criminal investigation. They can do a lot more. And it's important, of course, that you investigate and you preserve the evidence. We'll talk about that. Here are the three basic A's of computer forensics. You have to acquire the evidence without altering or damaging the original. And we'll talk about that. But you have to go out and make sure that when you look at it, you don't change the system, that nothing you do impacts the evidence. You have to make sure it's accurate. You have to authenticate it. And then you have to analyze it in a way that you don't modify it. The key here is that you have to do this without damaging the evidence, so that in no way is the information changed or altered anyway. So what do we do? Well, the first thing, of course, is securely collect the information. You had to go out and get the data, figure out what is going on, what data might be suspect, what is the information out there. Of all the information you might get on a computer, what do we want to look at? Examine that data and see if you can find any information of what has happened, what did go on, what caused it to happen. Then you have to put it in some sort of presentation so people will understand it. Remember that you're a computer expert. Many of you are working on a master's degree or finishing a bachelor's degree in computer science. You know more about computers than most people in the world. So you have to put it in a form that other people will understand. And it has to apply to the laws of the country. In other words, if you're going to accuse somebody of breaking a law, you have to show that what they did broke the law. Okay. So again, computer forensics is like a detective. You're a specialist investigating what happened. And there's all sorts of activities. Again, identification of the information. What went wrong? Keep it. You have to keep track of this. Make sure that nothing gets altered. We'll talk more about this, but it's very important in forensics to ensure that the data was not tampered or altered in a way, because if there's a possibility, just a possibility that the data or evidence has been altered, it's not going to be allowed in court. Then you have to collect the information, figure out what has happened, analyze it, and there can be a great mountain of evidence. Sometimes you're looking at system logs, looking at all the information on a hard drive, in which you've got gigabytes of data. There'll be a lot of stuff to look through, analyze. Finally, when you get it, put it in a format that people can understand. Then you got to make a decision, because before you bring it to a court, you have to be very clear, at least in your own mind, that this is what happened. If you're going to accuse somebody, you better be very sure that they did it. Chain of custody. This talks about keeping the evidence clean, the integrity of evidence, because the evidence cannot have been altered, either intentionally or accidentally. No process going on could have changed it, because computer files get changed when you log in, all sorts of things are happening. So you have to make sure that you haven't done anything that might have changed the evidence. And you have to keep track of the whole process from when you first get control of the computer or of the device, that until it's presented, you have to make sure, you have to document what you've been doing. Documentation is important because you have to be able to present the evidence in a way that's repeatable, that others could have done the same thing, that you followed all the rules. And the common things are, well, who collected it? Who went out and got the evidence? How and where? How did you do this? When did you take possession of this? If they think this laptop committed the crime, and you get hold of the laptop, who had it before you got hold of it besides the criminal? If 2 or 3 other organizations got it and they looked at it and logged in and see what's happening before you got it, well, a lot of things may have been occurred to the data before you have the opportunity to actually go out and find out what's going on. How was information stored? Where was it stored? And who took it out of storage and why? There's all sorts of places you can look. Networks. Things are going all over the network, and a lot of it is analyzed in some way. There's all sorts of network logs, tracing of paths. How does the data get from here to there? Communication analysis. Media analysis is a big one. Looking at the disk, not just the files on the disk, but sometimes the information on the disk that is not in the files. That would be slack space analysis. And of course, analyzing what is on the disk and what does it really mean. And we've talked about steganography before, hiding information. Is there information out there that is hidden? And of course, the steganography, we hide information where we hope somebody won't see it. But there are techniques, particularly statistical techniques, for looking at the data. For instance, we talked about hiding information in the least significant bits of an image. The image, without anything modified, will probably follow a certain statistical pattern. With data hidden in the bits, they will be a much different pattern, and good, careful analysis will find this. And then code analysis. Code analysis, looking at programs, reverse engineering, a topic I'm going to cover in about a week, where we talk about looking at a program and finding out what does that program do. And again, looking at malicious code, what did that program, and exploit review. Oh, we have another clicker question or another poll question. So here we go. Just a minute. And there, hopefully you can see that now. Okay, I expect people by now have answered if they're going to answer. All right, as you can see, make a copy of the hard drive is the answer A, and that is, in fact, the correct answer. You don't want to log in because logging in changes things. Looking at the browser history, well, the browser history is very valuable. No, you don't want to look at the browser history because you will be changing the browser history as you look at it. Immerse the computer in liquid nitrogen. An interesting concept. There are certain, I mentioned that absolutely, well, it's a pretty foolish concept because at least you put my laptop into liquid nitrogen, it will probably break. But researchers have shown that if you put the memory chips into liquid nitrogen, they will not forget things when you turn off the power. But putting your computer in liquid nitrogen is not a wise choice. It will break. Okay, rules of evidence. We are talking rules of evidence. Yes, we have to follow the rules to get information that we can submit in a court. If you get information, but you haven't followed the rules, if you haven't found data that is accurate and admissible, then it's kind of pointless. You may, in your heart, know that he did it, but if you can't prove it, it's kind of pointless. So it must be used in court, or of course, if it's a corporate investigation used in the corporate, but you have to find admissible evidence. It has to be authentic. It has to be real. It has to relate to the incident. In other words, you are investigating a particular incident, that information you gather must be related to that incident and not tangential, not something that doesn't matter, unless you can show that the tangential activities were related to the crime. Often, when you are investigating a crime, very early on, you think somebody did it. The butler did it. I'm sure the butler did it. But you have to be open to other opportunities. Maybe the butler didn't do it. Maybe somebody else did it and tried to make it look like the butler did it. So you have to keep open. Look at all the alternatives. Reliable, of course, there can't be any question about the reliability of the information. If it's got to be clear and obvious that this is true data from the computer system that you've been analyzing. And of course, you have to make it understandable and believable to a jury, because the jury, most of which will not be computer experts, they have to understand it. And remember that you know a lot more about computers than the average person. Oh, at least I hope so. If as a computer science faculty, I really hope that you know more about computers than other people, so that you can express it in an easy to understand way. Okay, let's talk about those in some more detail. Basic rule is validity and importance. It has to be preserved in a way. You have to make copies in a way that does not damage the original data. It has to be accessible to a court. And you have to has to be in a manner that's reproducible and admissible. Because anything you gather in a manner that is not legal, and we'll talk about legal restrictions in just a minute, can't be used. And sometimes that can ruin your case if you don't have admissible information. Authentic, it's got to be real. It's got to relate to the crime. And you have to find the origin. Are we sure that this was caused by a certain individual? If you're going to show that this individual created or did the crime, then you have to show that the evidence you acquired has to be from that individual. It's not just, well, somebody did it. You have to show that this person did it. Particularly if you have a computer that is available to the public. Say you're using a library computer and you're looking at a library computer because that's where the crime was committed. To show that the crime was committed on the library computer is of little value if you can't show what human being was on that computer. And it has to be clear and complete and reflect the whole story, not just the part. You have to explain what has happened. And again, you have to be sure that you give a wide perspective of what went on and not just focus on one individual. You're trying to show the truth, not just throw somebody in jail. You're trying to show what happened and how it happened. And again, if you have evidence that it's not admissible, that you put out there and they throw out, it just ruins your case. Reliable. It has to be correct. It has to be reliable. You have to show that you've used the proper tools and techniques in order to gather the evidence. And that any way you did it doesn't make the evidence inadmissible. Now, of course, the reproducibility is good. It's like a research project. You have to be able to reproduce this. If you make a copy of the disk, look at the copy, analyze it, it should be possible for a defending legal team to look at the same evidence and find the same information. Now, there are destructive techniques to do things, and you have to watch those. And if you do that, you have to do it in such a manner that it is clear what was extracted and how it was done, and it was done without damaging the information. And you have to believe it. The jury has to believe it. If the jury doesn't believe what you're doing, or if it's a judge in the case of a non-jury trial, they've got to believe what you tell them. That's the whole crux of the matter. If they don't believe it, then it's just not worthwhile. It costs a lot of money and effort to take a crime to trial, take somebody to trial. So it's very important, if you're going to do that, that people are going to believe it. You don't want to go to trial when you're not going to win. So it's important to get believable information, to show that you followed all the rules, that you've got this, it's understandable. Okay, yet another poll question to see if you're awake. Just a second. Anybody else want to guess? Oh. Okay, we got a pretty even split between true, false, and these are a couple of maybes. The answer is false. When you log into a computer, it starts running a whole bunch of programs. As you log in, lots of programs start up every time you log in. And many of these programs read information, write files, all sorts of things are happening when you log in. Sometime look at the task manager or its equivalent on Mac OS and look at all the things that are running. There's many programs besides the program that you think you're running. Right now, I'm running Zoom and PowerPoint, but there's probably nearly 100 programs running out there, and they read and write files and change a whole bunch of things about the system. So if you log in, that's going to change things. That is a problem. Okay, what should you do? You have to be very careful about the original data. That is, if you are looking at a hard drive, you have to be very careful of how you treat it so nothing gets damaged or changed. And if there are any changes, you got to account for them. You have to keep logs. Documentation is extremely important. Keep logs of what you did, how you did it, so that you can later show what steps were taken, that it can be reviewed, and people can see that, yes, you followed the rules of evidence, the 5 rules that we just talked about. Don't do things if you don't know what you're doing. There are other people who can help you. So be careful about what you're doing. Make sure you follow all the rules of evidence. Follow the policies. Obtain written permission where required. And capture as accurate an image of the system as possible, which would be typically the hard drive or its solid-state equivalent RAM, as much information as you have, and get it completely accurate so that there's no indication that something has been changed. Be prepared to testify. That is the purpose of the investigation, is to acquire data so that you can testify in court that you know what happened. Actions are repeatable. That is, whatever you did, somebody else can do the same thing and look in the same place and find the same. They will come to the same conclusion as you did when you collect the information. You want to work fast because when crime is going on, you want to make sure the person doesn't run for it or whatever. You have to make sure you go out and get this information quickly. And you start with the volatile information to the persistent things. If you have a computer and you got things in random memory, the volatile information, volatile memory is the type of memory you have when you turn off the power, it goes away. So, and don't run anything. Don't run programs on the system because that changes things. And the last one is document what you're doing. You have to keep records of what you did, how you did it, so that when somebody looks and wants to examine your evidence, and certainly if it's in a court case, the defense will want to look at what you did, how you did it. They're looking for holes. They're going to want to make sure that you didn't do it right. And if you do it right, then they don't have any way to fight you. Now, it should be noted that there are a number of laws that protect computer privacy and what can be collected. The Consumer Data Protection Act, the CDPA, requires that they get your information. This is the United States. There's also a European version that requires requires companies to inform individuals that they are acquiring your company. And I can't speak today. It requires that companies get your permission, your acknowledgement that they are acquiring information about you. This is why you see all these pop-up messages when you log in that says, this site uses cookies, because a lot of people consider the cookies to be information that they're gathering about you. You have to have your acknowledgement that they can collect that information. The companies have to disclose what they collect, how they collect it, what they do with it, who they might sell it to. Of course, in this world, people are collecting information all over the place and selling it to other companies that want to know. When you get to healthcare information, there are particularly stringent laws about that. HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, explains in great detail what you can do and how you must protect information relating to healthcare. So that if there's any information out there about somebody's health, it has to be protected, encrypted in such a way that nobody can see what it is except those that are allowed access to the information. And of course, there are several laws protecting children. There's Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA, is out there pertaining to information for children under 13. What can you collect about them? And again, you log into many websites. They say, are you older than 13? Or maybe older than 16? Older than 18? Some websites give themselves a little bit of leeway where they don't want to bother just about being 13 or older. They want you to be 21 or older to make sure that they aren't violating any laws. Because you don't have to do a lot, particularly with children. Just taking their picture, collecting information about them is probably illegal. You have to follow the law. In the US, we have several laws about privacy. The Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution protects you from unreasonable search and seizure. You can't just go out there and grab somebody's laptop and search it if you don't have, if there's a crime, you don't have a court order, you have to have a warrant to go out and do that. Just going out and looking at this, you can't do that. And it also applies in a corporate environment. You can't go out and just search somebody's laptop for something unless you have some indication that a crime has been committed with it. Also, the Fifth Amendment protects against self-incrimination. That means you can't, the Fifth Amendment was originally made so you can't torture the person until they confess that they did it. But the whole thing is you can't rely on the person telling you they did it. You cannot force that person to tell you whether they did it and didn't do the command. Excuse me, did or did not do the crime. You have to find out whether they did or did not do the crime. The Wiretap Act, you can't wiretap somebody's phone. You cannot record a phone call without all sorts of rules. And of course, if you violate any of these rules, you might be guilty of the crime. You might be fined or imprisoned if you do these things that are against the law. So instead of protecting yourself, instead of going out there and trying to show that somebody else committed a crime, you might commit a crime. Don't do it. I mentioned keeping the data safe. There are devices to take an image of a disk I have one here. I used to have one of these things. There's a device here that you plug into a disk drive, or plug this disk drive in. You take the disk drive out of the computer, plug it into this device, and it allows you to make a copy of the contents of the disk drive. This device has no write access. It's a read-only device. It can only read the disk drive. It cannot change the contents of the disk drive. It is much safer than one because, as I mentioned earlier, when you log in, it starts changing and writing things to the disk drive. So this device, you pull the disk drive or the solid-state disk or whatever it is out of the computer and copy it. Make a copy of it in a manner that does not possibly allow for anything to be changed. So you make yourself a copy. And typically, of course, you go out there and get the disk. There are other things. There are what's in the computer, the registers, the cache memory, what all sorts of contents are in RAM, what's in the operating system memory, the temporary files, what sort of data is. Of course, data on the disk is more persistent. The other ones are non-persistent or volatile data. Again, unfortunately, examining the files on a system changes the state of the evidence. If you are running a computer, then as the computer executes, it's changing the state of the computer, and that has some impact on the data that might be in the computer. And so you have to make sure that the data is not contaminated, that you have to make sure that it presents a true copy of the information. And I was impressed that this one says you only have one chance to do it right. I think we talked about this a little earlier in the course, but let's go over it real quickly again. How are files created and deleted? Okay. On your disk drive, you have usually a tree-structured file system that has a table of contents that lists all the files in there and has pointers to where on the disk the file data is located. It's usually stored in multiple blocks of data, and the file is just divided into a whole bunch of blocks. Actually, the hardware itself is divided into blocks, maybe 4K per block. And so a file, well, a really small file might have one block. Most files have multiple blocks that are linked together in the directory information. So there's lots of, and then everything that's not in a file, all the blocks on the disk that are not in a file are kept together. So whenever you create a file or when you add more data to a file, as the file gets bigger and bigger, as you edit it, you put more information on there. The operating system goes out and grabs more blocks from the available block pool and puts them into the file. When you delete the file, the system simply goes to the directory information of your file, finds out where on the disk all those blocks that it used are, and puts them back into the pool of available space so that they can be used for new files. Now, I might mention most systems have the trash can concept, where when you delete a file originally, it simply moves the file from the directory where it's located into the trash, which is just a trash directory. So it moves from the trash directory, keeps a little information about where it copied it, so you can look out of the trash and go, oh, I want that back. Click on it and put it back to where it was. But once you permanently delete it, once you go to the trash, say empty the trash, then it drops all the blocks and puts them into the free pool. Now, typically, the data is not overwritten. The systems do not erase what's on the disk. So the information that was in the file is still on the disk. It is not lost or destroyed. It's still out there. It's just not part of a file. And it's possible for investigators to look at all the data on the disk and look for files that were once there that are now deleted, that exist out on the disk. There are an assortment of tools that do this. They're pretty good at looking at old directory items, basically deleted directory items on your file system, and finding out how the blocks were linked together and showing what was a file that is no longer a file on your disk, seeing a deleted file. But that works well on your traditional rotating magnetic media. A lot of people are using flash memory. Flash memory is your solid state disks, your thumb drives. Most I'm thinking solid state disks here. A solid state disk has a lot of flash memory in it. And with flash memory, you can read it without any problem. You can go out and read individual bytes from the block of memory. But before you can write to the block, it has to be erased. Unlike rotating hard drives, where you can just write on it, read on it, doesn't matter. If it hasn't been erased, you can just write over it. You cannot just write over the data on a solid state disk. You have to perform an activity called a flash of the block before it can be written. I might mention too that flashing is somewhat destructive to the disk, that for most flash memory, you can only do it about 100,000 times before that block starts to wear out and doesn't work anymore. Well, because you have to flash the memory before you write on it, a lot of systems try to be efficient and fast. And so when you delete a file, and now that block is available, it has data on it. But of course, when it's allocated to a new file, the first thing you want to do with it as a new file is write more data in it. So you know the user is going to want to write data in that block that was just erased. So they have, it's called a trim function. And the trim function, I don't know why it's called trim, by the way. Trim function goes out there and erases it flashes the blocks that have been deleted. So when you next go to write on them, you don't have to flash them again. They've been cleared. You can just write on them directly. It's a performance improvement. So when you go out and writing to the disk, the blocks are already flashed for you. You don't need to worry about it. It flashes them in the background. When the disk is idle, it waits till nothing seems to be happening, and then uses the spare time to flash the unused blocks. This, of course, erases everything. So when you delete a file, in the sake of performance, this system has erased all the data. So that means that solid-state disks cannot be used for recovering files. It used to be a really neat technique that you could do with the old-fashioned disks, but it doesn't work with solid-state disks. And because there's data that are kept in an organized manner with your directory files, not all the data is stored on the disk is in a file. You can put data on the disk that's not in a file. As I mentioned, there's a pool of available available blocks on the disk. There's also all the files, and there's links to where all these files are. But there may be parts of the disk that are neither in the free pool or allocated to a file. And with a little clever working, you can create this data, and people can store information on that data. Of course, we're talking steganography now. We're hiding information on the disk. You can put it in a place where you can go back and get it. Usually, by the way, when I've seen this done, it's usually done in the beginning area of the disk, because that's where it's easiest to catch, because there are some blocks that are reserved, and you can put the data there, and then it's no longer in the file. If you look at the file, all the files in the disk, you won't find it. Look at the free space, you won't find it. It's on neither the free space or in the file. But there are tools that will tell you that there's space out there that's not in use. There's a check disk program on the Windows system and a similar disk system for Mac OS that goes out and validates the file system on your hard drive or solid state disk, whatever it is. And all it does is looks at all the space in the disk, finds out what space is used in files and what space is reserved in the free pool. And then, is there something that's neither here nor there? If it is, it reports that. Now, typically in most systems, it will build a file out of that free space and create a file and put it in the system with a silly name, recovered data 1, recovered data 2, and it goes out and tries to pull this stuff together. That can be useful because you can then go out and look at recovered data 1 and recovered data 2 and look at those blocks. And that was information that was not in a file or on the free space pool. So you can use those tools to go out and find information. Now, by the way, it may be malicious information, or it may be problems with the disk. Sometimes if you pull the plug without logging off your system, data can be lost, data can be not written out, and the file system may be corrupted to some minor extent. Now you might ask, why do we bother creating that duplicate image, going through all the trouble with the extra equipment that can only read it and never write it? Well, because anything you do on a computer changes the disk, and we need to make a copy. You want to make an exact copy, not just copy the files. You want to copy every byte of the system. Again, you have to preserve the original evidence. You don't want to change the disk that was in the computer. You need to make a copy of it, so nothing you do. So if you make a copy, then nothing you do to that copy changes the original data. You have not altered or corrupted the original data. And you have to make sure that you get every bit on this, because, of course, there may be information that's neither in the file or on the free space. So you have to go out and copy the whole thing, not just copying all the files, but copying every byte. Most of the devices that are used for forensic information collection will copy every bit on that file to another one. You need to, typically the thing is you get another disk that is the same size or bigger as the disk you're dealing with, and then use the copying device to copy everything from the evidence device to your copy. And you should make a couple copies. One, of course, is the copy that you're going to work with, the copy that you're going to investigate, look at, follow the logs and everything. And then one, which is a copy, a control one. You put away, store that away. So if there's a question about what's in your working copy, you can go back to the first copy. You don't want to have to go back to the original disk. Don't avoid changing or anything that might change the original disk drive. So that can be used as evidence, and it can be analyzed by other people. Oh, yes, and when you are copying information to a new drive, use a new drive. Get one, and you should. A lot of new drives have something on them, so you want to use a utility that zeroes out the whole drive, right? Bytes it all to zeros, so you know you have an absolutely clean drive. And when you copy to it, now in theory, of course, everything that's on the evidence drive should be copied to the new drive, but you want to make sure that everybody understands that. Make sure that you can say, oh yes, the disk was zeroed out. It's when you copy something to it, only thing that will appear on your copy is when something that was on the original device. All right, another question just to make sure you're awake. Okay, hey, people were quick on answering this one. Somebody must have woken up. There we go. As you can see, about 78% of the people said true, and only a small minority of the people said false. Only 22% of the people were correct. No, you should not be able to recover deleted files on most modern computers, because most modern computers use solid-state disks. My laptop, probably your laptop, uses a solid-state disk. And why wouldn't you? Solid-state disks are much faster than the original rotating media. Some people have, particularly if you have a desktop, might have a solid-state disk and a much larger rotating. The rotating media is usually cheaper, so people have to. But most computers. Oh, we got somebody's asking a question. Mr. Williams.
Yes, sir. So the answer is false, because most computers use solid state drive. But
That is correct.
But I thought that no matter if the user deleted it, there's still tools out there that we can still recover deleted files. It just replaces the memory. You just override the memory, right?
Well, when you have a solid state disk, when you delete a file, when you delete a file, it does the trim operation and it flashes or erases the file on a solid state disk. On a rotating traditional hard drive, doesn't do anything, it just leaves it there, and you can easily go out. There are lots of tools to go out and look at what was on the disk and find old files. They're pretty effective. I have run them before, but now, because the files are flashed. All the information on a file is deleted when a solid state disk. It's erased when you delete the file, which makes
Yes,
it
sir.
very difficult to go back and look. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, sir. So with SSDs, and let's say you delete something. So do you overwrite that like deleted information with the SSD, or just completely just have a new like location for it? If you understand what I'm asking.
Actually, it does both.
Okay.
It overwrites the information. In other words, it erases the parts of the file where the parts of the disk where the file used to reside. It zeroes them out. And then it also puts that file on the free queue. Now, on old-fashioned, well, not old-fashioned, on rotating disks, magnetic rotating disks, typically when they delete a file, they put it on a list of available space that will be used shortly again, because you like to keep all your files close together physically on the disk, so you don't have to do a long seek to get it. On a solid state disk, you'd rather not use that block again until you absolutely need to, because if you remember, the flash in the drive lowers its life. You can only flash a block of a solid state disk so many times before it breaks. So if you have 10 gigabytes of space, they put that available block now that you just released and erased on the end of a long queue, and they pull out blocks from the other side, so that block won't get used again until you have used all the other blocks once. But even though the block that has been released is still out there, it has been erased. It's been trimmed. And of course,
thank you.
Okay, it's not so much to protect the data, which it does, but it's there because performance-wise, they know you're going to have to flash it before you write to it. And so they flash it when the system is otherwise idle, when nothing much is happening on the disk. The disk drive goes out there and does these erasures. So you does them in the background so you don't notice. So when you want to write to that, and of course, you're going to want to rewrite to this file, it can write to it without having to do the eraser first. Okay, any other questions? That was good. Phones. We're all interested about phones because they are computers. A lot of information is kept about phones, probably more than computers, because everybody has one of these things in their pocket nowadays. The phone company, in addition to what you can find on the phone, all of which, all the information we talked about today applies to telephones as well as desktops and laptop computers. But there's also more. The phone companies keep track of all the calls you make, who you called, how long you called. That's how they charge you. If you go past your call limit or your phone limit, they're going to charge you. And long ago, and they used to charge you for every call. The long distance calls cost a lot of money, and they kept track of who you called and how long. And they still do that, even though they don't charge you. But if you look at your phone bill, the details, you can see every phone call you made, who you called, when you did it, and that sort of stuff. Works with text messages also. They keep track of all the text messages. And even more so, they send a text message or you get a text message. If you delete it, phone company keeps track of that stuff. They keep that information, and they've got timestamps. They know when it was sent. My phone only tells me when I got a text message. So if you send me a text message at 3 a.m. in the morning and I don't, my phone is turned off or something, and I get up in the morning, I turn it on, and I get the message, my phone will tell me, oh, you got this message at 7 a.m., when in fact it was sent at 3 a.m. But the phone company really knows when it was sent. Other information, you have a contact list, and that tells you who you have contact. You just look in your phone, you have all sorts of lists of who you've made calls to, who you sent texts to. People usually take pictures with their phone these days. There aren't a lot of people who actually have cameras anymore that aren't part of a phone. And even if you do have a camera, I have a camera, and it tells you carefully when the picture was taken and what GPS. In a JPEG format, in the header of a JPEG file, it contains the time and date the picture was taken, where it was taken, the GPS coordinates, the latitude and longitude of where this picture was taken. along with what kind of camera, what camera took the picture, or what kind of phone when it was done. So all this information is preserved in a JPEG or PNG or other type of file. And it's pretty accurate. I got a picture somebody sent me, and I was wondering, oh, where did they take that? And I looked at the latitude and longitude, went out to Google Maps, looked it up, and I can find exactly where they were when they took that picture. And of course, that's very useful for collecting evidence. The information on a disk drive is non-volatile. It's there when you turn off the disk drive. But computers have multiple levels of memory. You have the registers, you have cache memory, you have RAM, and you have disk memory. The registers, cache, and RAM are all volatile. When you turn off the computer, poof, everything disappears in that data. If the police break down the door and tell somebody, pull your hands away from that keyboard, you might have the computer still running, and you can look at things that are in the RAM, copy the RAM values to a USB drive, and make sure that you know what is on there. Even sometimes when they kick down the doors or whatever the police do, I don't know, and get in there, they might want to keep that computer running. My computer will go to sleep after a while if you don't do anything. They have mouse jigglers, a little device that wiggles the mouse so that it thinks you're there and thinks somebody's doing something, so it doesn't go into sleep mode. Computers have logs. Most operating systems, every operating system almost every operating system I've used, keeps track of what's going on. Microsoft Windows, Mac OS, both have a lengthy list of logging operations. It used to be you could, at least in the Windows world, you could specify what do you want to log. They've given up on that concept, and they just log everything now. Just by default, everything is logged. When you log in, when you log out, the logs are often used for operating system maintenance. If there's an error, either in an application program or the operating system, it writes all sorts of information to the log saying, oh, what happened? It helps people trying to fix these software problems to know just what happened. And it also helps forensic investigators look at the logs and find out what's going on. Because usually every time you open a file, every time you log in, every time you run a program, all of this is logged. So you can look in the logs of the computer and find out what they were doing. And of course, browsers. I mentioned browser histories. One of the questions was, yes, your browser keeps track of where you've been and what websites you looked at and when you did it. Oh, here's an old war story from long ago and far away. I was the manager of systems programming on a mainframe computer long ago. And some student got hold of the root password, the administrative password for our system. It was a phishing attack, but they got hold of that password and they thought they'd do something nasty. They thought they'd crash our computer. They logged in to the computer on a stolen account. That is, they did not use their account. They were at least smart enough to know not to use their own account when they committed the crime. So they found some other student's account. They kind of looked over some of the student's shoulder, found out their password, and logged in with that. And when they got logged in, they deleted some system files. And of course, when some of the system files were deleted, for instance, I think they got one of the major libraries that has all the compilers, all the editors, the major programs that you use on a computer, and they were no longer available because they deleted them. And we had to restore the files on the system. Okay, so some jerk take us down. I'm out there. I got to figure out who did this, how do they do it, and what can we do to prevent it in the future. So I looked at the logs, and I could see what account logged in and what account deleted the files, because when you deleted a file, you kind of had to access it, and that was recorded in the logs. I could then see what account accessed it to delete it. So I knew what account, but we also knew that this was a stolen account. It wasn't the original account holder. tell you the truth, I don't remember why we knew it wasn't the original, but we knew it wasn't the original account holder. So we know somebody did it, but we don't know who it was. Well, not only did the system logs, but we had network logs that keep track of everybody logging into the computer. So we knew that the user who did this attack came in on a dial-up line. But before they did that, on the same dial-up line, the attacker had logged on with his real account. In other words, he had dialed up. This is back in the days with phone modems. It was a while ago. With the phone modem, dialed up, logged in with his own account, then logged off and didn't hang up the phone and logged in with the account that he had stolen. So we knew that the person who used the stolen account also used the real student's account. So we knew that was, explained it to the dean of students. Well, the student and I went to the dean of students, and the dean of students asked him. The student eventually admitted that, yeah, he did it, thought it was fun. The dean of students did not think it was as much fun, and just told us, I remember, he just told the student that, okay, if you go out here and the secretary will help you withdraw from the university. And so he did. Okay, and again, the logs out there. Well, the logs keep track when there's an error. If something doesn't work, they go, oh, this is what happened. And you, by the way, if you're a software developer, write information to the log. There's all sorts of logging features in every language you use, every system you have. Create a log and write things to the log when they go wrong. Because in a production system, you just can't print error messages on the screen for the user to read. They don't care. You need to put this information in a log so that you can read it later on. Also, besides errors, warnings. Sometimes, well, this didn't quite look correct. I mean, the system is still running, everything's going, but something doesn't appear appropriate. Put out warnings, because as soon as something starts not looking correct, it may lead to errors later on, or it may give you a hint as to what the problem is as far as software debugging. But it can give you a hint if somebody's doing something wrong. Why did somebody do that? That's suspicious. And again, there are information logs. What happened? Somebody accessed a file, somebody did this. There's, in the Windows system, we have success audits. Every time you try to do something, you logged in or logged out, it records that. More interesting is the failure. Every time you tried to log in but did not, then that's recorded. Anti-forensics. It's a weird title I made up, but means when you're doing something that might, these are tools that try to erase the information. There are tools out there that will erase the logs to try to keep track. A lot of malware, well, not a lot, but some malware, when it's done something, the last thing it does is try to go out and erase the logs, change the logs, so it's hard to tell what you did and when you did it. So it goes out there and erases the logs to make it difficult for forensic investigators to find out what you did. And so the purpose of what I call anti-forensic tools go out there to erase the information to make it harder to find out. I think of it as wiping the fingerprints off the gun after you shot somebody. Intrusion detection. We'll talk about that more next week, but intrusion detection is a system that tries to look at the network and see something funny going on. Is something that might not be correct happening. Again, I'll talk about this next week. Problem with intrusion detection, of course, sometimes it's difficult to tell if this is inappropriate, and you can also encrypt things. Okay, if you're really interested in computer forensics, there are a variety of professional organizations and forensic certification. The International Association of Computer Investigative Specialists, IACIS, offers certificates in that. So if you want to be a forensic investigator, you want to go out and get certified. That shows to a court investigator that you know what you're doing. If you're going to present information, somebody will say, what do you know about forensics? And you can say, oh, I am certified. I have this certification from this international, national known computer forensics group. So that's always valuable. There are multiple jobs out there. Of course, computer cybersecurity is a really good field for getting a job. And not only cybersecurity, computer forensics, there's jobs out there for that. You can be a forensics investigator, basically a detective with a computer. You can go out there and get this information like we talked about today. You can analyze it. There's all sorts of people in the background looking at this in the lab, going through the information, trying to find out what's going on and make it in a presentable format. And then, of course, there's technicians that search through the information and try to do it. That's it for today. Reminder of the schedule. Today, we talked about computer forensics. On Wednesday, we'll be talking about privacy. And a week from today, it's again back to online only. And we'll be talking about artificial intelligence impact on computer forensics in some sense, and how it impacts computer crime. Next week is Thanksgiving. While Thanksgiving is always on a Thursday, at A&T, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, the day before, is a holiday, and there are no classes that day. In 2 weeks from today, we'll be getting ready to do a review and probably some other material as we get ready for the third exam in this course. There are 3 exams, and then the final exam, which is during the final exam week at the allocated time. That's it. Were there any? Oh, and of course, end of course evaluations are out there. By the way, end of course evaluations. A number of the graduate students have filled out the course evaluations. Not a single undergraduate has done it so far. Hey, folks, pull it together. Please fill out the evaluations for all your classes. They are important. The university administration believes these student evaluations are extremely important. Several years ago, I was chair of the computer science department before Dr. Roy, before Dr. Yuan, before Dr. Dozier. See, it's a long time ago. I was chair of the computer science department just after Dr. Monroe. Yes, if you've gone to Monroe Hall on campus, that Monroe. Yes, and when I was chair, I had to evaluate the faculty on their teaching. How do I know how they taught? I looked in the course evaluations. So be sure to fill them out. They are extremely important. Does anybody have any other information, any other questions about today's topic or any topic? Okay, well, I will see you, particularly if you are one of the students that attend live and in person. I'll see you Wednesday, 4:30, usual time and place. Other than that, I'll see everybody else online. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you.